protagonist to give him a good shake. But when he saw the girl sitting at the table, he asked if she was Kukwina's girlfriend. The girl blushed, wondering if it looked that way. But the boy denied it before she could say anything. The two argued until Han told them to shut up, and Kukwina trembled in fear, while the old man analyzed the situation. After they calmed down, the president was informed about the problem with Passive Kid, saying that this man was copying items to sell, but the old man didn't seem too concerned. He thought it was something important, which was why he came to meet Kukwina, but something like this couldn't be resolved so easily, as there were various laws regarding money transactions and item sales, and the company couldn't interfere directly. The protagonist explained that someone saw the equipment being duplicated, but Choi remained stubborn, saying that they were probably mistaken. After all, this would only be possible if Passive Kid hacked the game. Kukwina theorized that it might be a bug, but the president insisted there was no such problem in the game. Then Han asked them to focus. If external hacking was impossible, it was likely someone inside the company using admin tools to copy equipment and then sell it. Choi seemed concerned but said this also wasn't possible. Even people inside the company with admin accounts wouldn't add a copy ability because it was useless. The president left, saying he was busy. He quickly said goodbye and wished the two a great date. Outside the restaurant, we saw the old man lighting a cigar surrounded by a few employees. Choi gave the order to prepare 5 trusted men. Back in the game, we see Han and Little Underpants looking downhearted because they couldn't make any progress. But the boy says that it doesn't matter who the enemy is, just use the ultimate stick to crush the passive boy or anyone else in the protagonist's way. The girl comments on how macho the boy is. Moving on, Han wonders what the passive boy's goal is. It's all very strange. No matter how much he thinks about it, if it's just for money, why attack the entire Robin Hood guild? The boy suggests that maybe the enemy's interest was in stealing the guild's valuable items. Han responds that this only makes things more suspicious. If copying the gear to sell is possible, why go after normal players and even annihilate an entire guild? Little Underpants thinks for a moment and admits he has no idea. The girl calls him an idiot. A massive explosion erupts nearby. Han believes it's a power similar to that of the protagonist. Little Underpants rushes towards the site. We move to the scene of the disaster, where we see Habak kneeling, seriously wounded. The passive boy is standing over him, saying that the monster isn't what the rumors suggest. It's nothing but a weakling. The Stitched Man asks why this person is doing this. As the coordinator of this world, his actions wouldn't be tolerated. If caught, would he be able to face the consequences? The passive boy, full of rage, grabs him by the neck and questions where all that arrogance comes from. How could a mere fragment of data dare speak like that to an administrator? The cheater threatens to eliminate Habak unless he reveals the location of his master, the infamous merchant known as Riot, the Sin of Sloth. The Stitched Man laughs at the situation, and when the administrator sees he's being mocked, he loses patience and raises his sword to deliver the final blow to Habak. But he's interrupted by a mysterious presence commanding him to stop. The administrator seems pleased to see this person, as it's one of his targets. One who arrived is Luna, also known as the Goddess of Life. The cheater tells the girl to wait her turn, as he's still finishing off Habak, and once he's done, he'll turn his attention to her. The goddess, smiling, says that all of this is so unnecessary, and that the man is nothing but a mule. The passive boy is offended, but the goddess continues to speak and calls him trash. The man still has his sword raised, but he seems to have lost his anger. Throwing Habak aside, the cheater says he's not going to waste time, she's next anyway. As he moves towards the goddess, he asks where Riot is, but the girl doesn't need to respond just yet. After all, it would be too easy if everything ended quickly. The passive boy threatens to do all sorts of terrible things to the goddess. Remaining silent, she recalls our protagonist and says that the two are similar, but at the same time completely opposite. The cheater says he doesn't understand what that means, and before he can say anything else, he's utterly crushed by a monster. The goddess looks on coldly, responding to the man's last question. Yes, he seemed like the protagonist, but at the same time he was very different, because the cheater was utterly disgusting. Then the goddess begins to walk away as if she's leaving, but something unexpected happens. The enemy is still alive. Standing up and asking if the monster that crushed him is the girl's servant, he immediately assumes that's why she's so confident. Luna looks confused, surprised that the man is still alive, but apparently he won't be for long, because now the girl will make sure he's dead. Trash like that doesn't deserve to live. The passive boy ignores the insults and says he doesn't care about that. An aura rises around them, filling the entire space. They are transported to the administrator's zone, a privilege granted for special purposes like game tests. The cheater tells the girl to stop thinking that place is like real life. In the end, she's nothing but a stupid girl. The goddess turns and keeps her focus on the enemy. Then, we are taken to another scene, where Han and Little Underpants are running toward the explosion site. Han asks if the situation has anything to do with the cheater, and Little Underpants, at the peak of his intelligence, says it's very likely. He also believes the hacker works for the game company, based on the conversation they had in the restaurant with the president. The old man denies this assumption because Choi said a hacker within the team was impossible, but his face said otherwise. She also heard about the cheater's feat, The man single-handedly wiped out the Robin Guild. That's why he's sure the guy has an account with various powers. Han says that's a great explanation, but is there any way to run faster? The boy says it's impossible because he has few points in agility, but it doesn't take long to get to the fight's location. As they notice the strange aura in the area, they wonder what it is. Habak is leaning against a nearby tree, and he explains the situation. Those are traces of the passive boy's skill. Habak then greets the protagonist, and the boy asks why he's there. The girl remembers being kidnapped by the man standing before them. Habak says he was attacked by the administrator, and besides that, the cheater dragged Luna into the test zone. The protagonist asks who Luna is, and the Stitch Man is surprised he doesn't know. After all, she's the goddess of life and his first love, and she talks a lot about the boy. The boy is confused by this, while Han grits his teeth in anger. Habak starts describing Luna, saying she's a woman with long black hair and a voluptuous figure. Only then does Lee realize she's the girl who betrayed him. Han, feeling jealous, says he doesn't know Little Underpants type of girl yet. But the young man makes it clear that he's not interested in Luna anymore, at least not now. The goddess herself is spreading those rumors. He even considers it offensive to think he'd like someone who insulted his parents. Han pretends to be indifferent, but he seems quite pleased inside. The dragon that had disappeared for the past 10 years shows up just to say they make a cute couple. Habak starts to worsen, and the boy comments that the Stitched Man will probably die soon, but Habak insists he's fine and asks for help from the protagonist. The boy asks why he should help. It would be much better to let him die and then grab the drop afterward. Han thinks that's a great idea, but Habak argues that if he dies, the mirror will also disappear. This worries our boy a bit. Placing his hand on his shoulder, Little Underpants says he'll heal him at all costs. The Stitched Man calls the protagonist worse than garbage. The girl asks how they're going to help the monster since they're out of healing potions. The boy tells her to relax, activating a skill called Cleric's Spirit, and he uses his talent to heal Habak. It was indeed a healing skill, but it took a long time to restore health. Perhaps the protagonist should have invested more points in the intelligence attribute. Little Underpants asks what happened to Habak's arm and continues, saying that the body will regenerate, but completely damaged parts won't restore. The Stitched Man explains that bosses like him only fully recover after death. So the boy has a brilliant idea. He just needs to eliminate the Stitched Man, and the situation will resolve itself. But it's not that simple. Special monsters like the Stitched Man don't respawn after being defeated. This happens because bosses with an unusual nature don't change much if they disappear. It's said that Eurus is also a rare monster, which is why he desperately begged for mercy from Little Underpants when they fought in the past. Besides them, Luna is also a unique boss. After this revelation, we see the protagonist's surprise. Inside the administrative zone, we resume the battle. The cheater is heading toward the goddess. The girl says he can come at her with everything he's got, and a series of extremely destructive attacks are launched by the passive boy. But none of it is enough to defeat the girl, who remains unharmed. She says she's the goddess of life and repeats what she told the protagonist. Humans can't kill a god. The administrator calls it childish, suggesting that the girl imagines herself to be very powerful. However, in the current state, the cheater has the advantage because after working in the company for so long, he's been able to access all of Luna's skills, so none of the girl's attacks will surprise him. The fight between Luna and Little Underpants was recorded and shared with senior team leaders at the company. The true nature of her power is revealed. Even if attacks hit the girl, none of them seem to work. This is the goddess's hidden ability called life creation. However, the attacks are nullified. Quite the opposite. Any hit she receives is effective, but her power allows her to regenerate at the moment of imminent death. Continuing the fight, the cheater attacks her again, and the girl immediately activates her talent and remains intact. The administrator says it's a predictable result, that power is absurd, which is why it was the most criticized ability during the initial game phase. We also discover the origin of Uriken. He was created from the goddess's life creation and the fragments of the missing head of Eurus. Apparently, the girl can make extremely powerful monsters. Luna says the cheater talks too much. If he can't win, all that knowledge becomes useless. With a single attack, the man is cut in half. The girl seems to really enjoy this method of elimination. Now the fight seems to have truly begun, but suddenly, the goddess's staff returns to its ordinary form. At this point, the man asks if she knows why they're in that space. The girl's regression to her initial level is a big surprise, leaving her completely defenseless and worried. The enemy enjoys the expression on the girl's face. Despite being so annoying, she could still make a cute face. Then Luna is mercilessly pierced by the cheater's sword. If he kills her, the master of Habak is sure to appear, right? As his final act, the administrator bids farewell to the goddess of life. In the real world, we're taken to a sort of hotel with several bottles of drinks on the table. The passive boy is drinking with a woman and a couple, saying that it's good to have some fun after doing a lot of overtime. The other man with him agrees, saying they made so much progress with their plan because they worked really hard. That was the final stage of the project. However, the cheater tells his friend that he's wrong. He couldn't find Habak's master, so the guy congratulates him on managing to kill Luna. But we discover that even that wasn't possible. The man is shocked and the administrator brushes off his failure, saying there are other ways to meet Habak's master. Something isn't clear to his companion. Who exactly is this master that his boss is so eager to meet? The cheater asks if the man has been his subordinate all this time without knowing the main objective behind his actions. Supposedly, this guy has been devoted enough to work without asking questions since his youth. Basically, this master is one of the game's bosses, tied to the main story of criminal life. The creature is the greatest merchant known as Sloth. Even with this explanation, the lackey seems unsure, asking if the monster is really a merchant. The answer is clear. If the lazy one wants to be a vendor, he will be. That's the kind of freedom in the game. Straining his memory for relevant information, the intern says he's heard about this boss before. When he thinks about it, a monster named Urakin caused a lot of chaos and was known as Gluttony for having an ability that absorbed others. His boss feels embarrassed. The boy doesn't even know that these monsters are classified as the 7 deadly sins. It's a concept often used in films and games, the sins being pride, greed, envy, wrath, lust, gluttony, and finally, sloth. These sins are the source of all others, hence why they're called the 7 deadly sins. The team leader asks if the intern now understands the concept behind the game's main story. Eurus represents pride, Urakin represents gluttony, Riot represents sloth, and Luna represents lust. Finally, the intern starts using his brain power to try to figure something out, saying it's obvious. As expected, Luna was also a unique boss in Chrono Life. Of course, someone with such a powerful ability couldn't be an ordinary player, otherwise it would completely disrupt the world's balance. Continuing with the story, the administrator tells the intern not to get confused. The girl might be a unique monster, but she's not an NPC. The boy asks what that means. Could an ordinary player really become one of the greatest monsters in that world? The old man explains that the freedom in the game is so great that it defies simple interpretation. Just as a monster can become a renowned merchant, an ordinary player can also become a special class boss. Finally, we're back to the journey of Little Underpants, the most sought-after man of the moment. Look at his cute little face. It seems the group was discussing the same topic as the guys earlier. Suddenly, Luna became famous and Little Underpants grows impatient, not knowing who this girl really is. He questions Habak, but even the Stitched Man isn't sure if the girl is a mix of NPC and player or just one or the other. However, the coordinator of that world should know more about it since the passive boy is an administrator. Great, another reason for the protagonist to beat the guy up. Han says he doesn't understand something. Why does the cheater desperately want to meet Riot, the sin of sloth? If his goal is to make money, he just needs to put the copied items on auction and wait for some sucker to buy them. There's also the matter of his senseless attack on the Robin Hood Guild. His actions make no sense. Personally, Habak has an idea why the administrator did all that. From his perspective, it could be related to the Peace of God, but it's likely it's a mythical rank item. Little Underpants remembers hearing about the Peace of God before. Eurus mentions that possessing the divine fragment was the reason for Han's kidnapping. He further explains that the term Peace of God is another name for mythical rank items. Out of nowhere, Hong shows up. She seems to have been hiding in the bushes to eavesdrop on their conversation. Do you think this girl is a strong candidate to be a protagonist's second wife, or is Han enough? With the energy of our Little Underpants, I'm not sure one will be enough. Back to the story, the leader of the Robin Hood Guild apologizes for disappearing. It turns out there were ways to get information, so she left to conduct her own investigation. Along with her explanation of why she disappeared, a masked woman asks everyone to form a group for a while. She says she's found the hideout of the thieving boy. At the location that's supposedly the enemy's base, everyone is amazed at the house's simplicity. Hong says there's no doubt about it. She even checked the owner's identity with her judgment skill. This talent confirms who owns the place. Little Underpants asks where the abusive boy is now, but there's no sign of him. The leader says it's a pity they can't see inside the house. However, the boy with the stick remembers the teachings from his time. When something doesn't work, just hit to fix it. In this case, if the door won't open, just break down the wall. Everyone goes inside the house and stands in front of a pile of gold. Han is amazed by the number of items. Could they all be copied? Hong says none of those pieces of equipment are copied, and moreover, they're all mythical rank. Guessing at a value, everything should cost around 5 billion. You can also see several items stolen from the Robin Hood Guild. The thief must have stored them in that house because he didn't have enough space in his inventory. As expected, the abusive boy's goal is to collect mythical ranked materials. Little Underpants asks if the cheater does this because of the price of those items on the market. If that's the case, it would be better to gather a lot of weapons by defeating monsters in the Eurus nest, just like the protagonist did in the past. Hong says if the passive boy did something like that, the company would definitely notice, just like they did with Little Underpants. Mythical items are on a different level, and there's an entity that can buy them for an outrageous price. Our boy quickly figures out who she's talking about. The buyer is the greatest merchant in Chrono Life, Riot the Sloth. Habak says he was thinking the same thing. The Robin Hood Guild leader takes the situation seriously. Regardless, it's a great plan. After all, the Sloth isn't an ordinary player, so there's no risk of information leaking. Not to mention that selling the items individually won't affect the game's economy. which makes it unlikely the company would catch him. But now that there's proof of the crime, all they need to do is report it to customer service and action will be taken. The administrator has been collecting items in his personal space. This is all the evidence needed to ruin his career. With a smile, Hong congratulates everyone on their work. This is why everything will work out, because of them. Little Underpants asks with whose permission she's going to report this. Is she directing a drama? She hasn't stopped talking all day. The leader is confused and asks if there's any other alternative besides that. Little Underpants joyfully responds that there is, of course. They give the abusive boy a good lesson. In the starting village, we see the protagonist wearing a Robin Hood Guild mask. In front of him is the infamous cheater, with an expression of pure joy. Han wonders if this is the man he's heard so much about in recent days. If this guy is the abusive boy, then he took the bait just like Lil Underpants said he would, right in the center of town. The cheater asks why the mask, and our boy says he borrowed it, because he's a famous figure. Anyone would recognize him if he walked around without a disguise. Hong watches from a distance with a few members of her guild, who ask if that's not the murderous boy who wiped out a large portion of the organization. She confirms the members' assumption and adds that everything is under control. So far, the plan is going as planned. A guild member asks what's the purpose of approaching the middle of the village. Back at the MANHWA boy's cabin, the protagonist continues to develop his plan. First, they have to collect all the items from the place. His prospective wife asks why, and Little Underpants just says to do it. Besides, he asks to borrow a mask, preferably the one she's wearing. Unfortunately, Han seems to be marking his territory. A single critical hit would be enough to dismantle Little Underpants right in the middle. Sometime later, we see the fool boy arriving at his house. He finds only half of the wall still standing and he quickly assumes he's been robbed. When he enters to check, that's exactly what happened. On the floor is a note, and the message says for the robbed boy to go to the center of the starting village at 7 p.m. He wants his items back. Love, Little Underpants. After reading that note, the man grinds his teeth in anger, maintaining the same expression even now, facing the most overpowered human in the whole game. The stolen boy asks how the protagonist dares take all his money. Little Underpants tells him to calm down and not get too close. Then he asks Han for an item. With the weapon in hand, the protagonist threatens to sell it to the NPC shop if the cheater keeps coming closer. Disbelieving, the passive boy asks Lee to stop. That equipment is worth 200 million in-game currency, and if he sells it to a bot, he'll only get 300 gold. Finally, the man asks what the protagonist wants. Little Underpants says he wants nothing more than to have some fun with him. Would there be a problem with that? How will the passive boy react now? Watching him tremble with rage is just too satisfying for our stick-wielding boy. Amidst the provocations, the cheater loses his cool and uses his privilege called the administrative zone. The battle begins within the space, and the opponent questions how a nobody dares fight against an administrator. He probably doesn't even know that Lee doesn't flinch even for the president, let alone someone lower in the hierarchy. A blow strikes the protagonist, throwing him away and splitting his mask in half. Little Underpants despises the man's attitude, calling an in-company player useless. The opponent advances, saying that game addicts like the protagonist forget about reality. They are so immersed in the game that they go crazy and treat characters like they're humans. According to Lee, it's shameful to blame players for no reason. Is the cheater having a midlife crisis? The murderous boy moves back to prepare an attack. The protagonist tries to predict its direction but can't, getting hit by thousands of strikes at once. This time, the cheater seems to want to convey a deeper message, saying that all players are equal. It doesn't matter how much hard work the developers put in, all they get is insults and criticism. 7 years ago at the Chronolife headquarters, there was the young developer. But we're back in the present because the protagonist isn't interested in pointless chit-chat. How dare he try to use the villain's sad backstory to justify himself? Little Underpants doesn't care. All the troublesome boy will get is stick to the face and a lot of shouting. The careless opponent takes a direct hit from our boy but regenerates with a healing factor. Little Underpants wonders what abilities the administrator can still use since they're confined in a room where he's the supreme authority. The item thief uses the skill called Spirit of a Titan. Impressed, Lee imagines what attributes were enhanced by activating this skill. A gigantic aura forms and begins to envelop the man. That's the Spirit of the Titan. While the talent is active, damage and range are increased by a mere 1000%. Just by swinging his sword, the attack covers a ridiculous area. While the protagonist quickly realizes that this is clearly hacking, so he activates the Gluttony skill to absorb the cheater's status. But the passive boy reacts by activating a speed skill, initiating another sequence of attacks. Little Underpants doesn't seem to be in a very good condition. The ragged boy says the outcome of a battle is determined by status and calculation, and he has all attributes at level 99,999. The protagonist soon takes a punch to the stomach, and the passive boy says that it doesn't matter how good his control is against such an enormous power difference, there's no chance of winning. He even belittles the boy's game mechanics, saying from his perspective he's just an idiot who relies on items to reach the highest level. This doesn't make our boy happy. Hearing this from everyone is annoying, but that man is also just a criminal taking advantage of an administrative account. Yet you can see the cheater's nonchalant expression. He even asks if the protagonist isn't jealous. After all, he only needed to make a few adjustments to the data to become the strongest character. Before the passive boy can finish his thought, he gets headbutted by our boy, thrown back, disoriented, and wondering how he got knocked down so fast, even though the opponent's agility is so low. Little Underpants, lying with his face on the ground, says it's just a game mechanic. Once again, the battle reaches its peak when the cheater decides to use another talent called Speed of Light Dash, which seems like an improved version of the previous skill. All confident, Little Underpants' enemy says to come at him with everything he's got, and nothing he does will compare to his power. The protagonist uses a strike from his stick to propel himself and gain speed, allowing him to hit his target head-on. Isn't that amazing? He only needed to turn off the rebound control option in the game settings. He also asks how it feels to take a hit like that, but his opponent doesn't yield and keeps talking about how the game's mechanics are garbage, so Little Underpants shouldn't get too excited. The boy agrees, saying it's true because it's much slower than using a speed skill, but he concludes that it's past time to end this. The angry boy tells the protagonist that he doesn't understand the situation. Because of that lucky hit, Little Underpants has become way too overconfident. A mere player can't win a battle against an administrator. However, the protagonist says there's a way. Raising his hand toward the enemy, the boy bids farewell to the passive boy. Even though he was fast, it was fun. Suddenly, we're back in the square where Hen is sitting, wondering about Little Underpants' situation. Hong is beside her, commenting that she doesn't know the details either. Even his girlfriend doesn't know that it must really be confidential information. Han is giddy after being recognized as the protagonist's girlfriend. The leader of the Robin Hood Guild says something is bothering her. The reason Little Underpants is missing must be related to his method for defeating the passive boy. We return to the battle, where the protagonist seems to be summoning something and the administrator trembles with fear, thinking he's about to be defeated. Then the boy activates his summoning skill. The cheater bursts into laughter. How does Lee intend to win with something so simple? Even though his class is very special, it wouldn't be possible to summon a super powerful monster. However, the cheater quickly goes silent because the man standing before him is Choi, the company president. With a look of surprise on the opponent's face, the protagonist starts laughing. It was worth bringing the president even after so much work. The previous day, we see the criminal in the real world, just leaving the small party he had with his intern. His friend invites him for another round of drinks, but the man refuses because he has some obligations in the game and needs to finish some calculations. The employee is impressed with his boss's passion for work and says he respects that. In response to the compliment, the passive boy tells the kid not to mess around and go home. They're going to be very busy the next day. Grabbing the shoulder of a blonde girl, the intern says he's going to have a few more drinks. He's walking calmly until he's stopped by Choi and some of his men. Moments later, we see the young man with his face completely busted, admitting all the plans he made with the cheater, revealing that he was just following his boss's orders. After hearing this, the president orders his thugs to get rid of the kid. Then Choi turns to thank the protagonist. It was thanks to him that they managed to catch a traitor before the situation became even more problematic. Lee gets scared. Is this a gaming company or the mafia? The old man warns that he intended to kill Little Underpants if he called him again without a good reason. Returning to the main topic, the president says he's already taking steps to deal with the passive boy. They plan to bring in the legal department to sue him in every possible way, and of course they'll fire the cheater as well. The protagonist asks if, by any chance, the old man has any plans for tomorrow at 7 p.m. Choi replies that he doesn't, so Lee smiles and invites the old man to give the abusive boy a lesson. Back in the administrative zone, we see the delinquent shaking in the presence of the president. Desperate, he tries to leave the game, but that's not possible during a battle. As a last-ditch effort, the man tries to dissolve this administrative zone. Little Underpants warns the president that the sleazeball is trying to escape, so Choi activates his own presidential zone. Right away, the cheater is filled with fear. It doesn't matter anymore. He was going to be fired anyway, so he decides to attack the old man. However, he can't even touch the president. His in-game status has no limits. It's literally infinite. Preparing his ultimate attack, Choi fires the cheater, and as a parting gift, gives him a black eye. One punch was enough to annihilate someone like the passive boy, and so the problem came to an end. All the stolen mythical items returned to their rightful owners. It turned out that other guilds had been affected, not just Robin Hood. But the perpetrator was fired on the same day, and even in real life, the cheater took a beating from the president. Afterward, he tried to sue the old man for assault, but that only made things worse for him. No one was interested in incriminating Choi, so all charges against the president were dropped. Now the man is going to spend the rest of his life paying back the company for material damages. Some rumors say he's been permanently banned from the gaming industry. After that day, Little Underpants' life as a merchant returned to business as usual. In the starting village, the protagonist meets with his two wives, who greet him happily. Everything was back to normal. Exiting the game, we see Lee, who mentions he's annoyed because he didn't get to ask the cheater what Luna's true nature is. Looking ahead, our boy sees a beautiful girl sitting on the couch. In front of him, the girl says it's been a while. Shortly after, we see them eating at the table. The girl compliments the appearance of the food, saying it looks great. At least now there's no doubt. Obviously, Luna isn't an NPC. What a beautiful woman, my friends. She's always been a player. She looks at Lee and they lock eyes. Then she asks if she's really that beautiful. The boy says he wasn't looking for that reason. She must be imagining things. She should just stop being silly and eat in silence. Little Underpants is very nervous, remembering the past and realizing he can't let himself be swayed by the girl's looks. So he starts questioning, asking who she is and how she knows his address and the password to his house. Since Lee gave her food, it's worthy of a reward. Besides, the boy must be curious about many things. This is his chance to ask anything. The girl will answer everything. The boy says he understands and starts with a light topic. What's her natural hair color? When they met for the first time in the game, it was light pink. Luna is happy that the change in her appearance was noticed, and she confirms that yes, that's her natural hair color. Luna gets curious. Maybe Little Underpants prefers pink hair. Should she dye it? Without wasting time, the protagonist wants to know if the girl is a special boss in the game. In the past, the goddess of life apparently died at the hands of the passive boy. If that really happened, her user should have been deleted. In response, she says that she was eliminated, but her character didn't disappear. This was because her death occurred in a human state. She didn't know it at the time, but if you're attacked by an administrator in the test zone, the god's authority vanishes. It was a relief. Otherwise, she would have died as a unique boss and not in her human form, which would have meant her user being deleted. The protagonist asks if she intends to kill 1,000 players again to become the goddess of life once more. Luna asks if the boy really thinks that just by eliminating 1,000 players, she can regain her former class. The boy is confused. She explains that it's only one of the conditions to become the goddess of life, and on top of that, you need to complete very complicated tasks. Only then can you change class. Plus, the girl has full control over her form. She can turn human or goddess at will. She asks if that was all, and the protagonist thanks her for answering all his questions. But Luna still hasn't said who she is. Lately, wherever Little Underpants goes, the girl follows as if she's stalking him. Doing that outside the game is also crazy. If everything isn't clarified, he's going to call the police. Trying to explain her condition, she says that many people are hindering her goal. The reason she traveled a long way to our boy's house was to make an offer. Luna begs for Lee to be her man. That's quite the charmer. He got the girl to take the initiative. Thinking it's a proposal, Little Underpants gets extremely confused. The doorbell rings. Thank goodness. Just imagine having to stay in a situation like that. The boy quickly heads to the door, thinking it might be his escape from the awkward atmosphere. But it turns out that the person at the door is his future girlfriend. If she finds his mistress or guests in the house, that would be a huge problem. Hannah's welcomed in and says she's impressed with the house. It's very organized. She notices the food on the table, and Little Underpants trembles with fear. The longer they keep talking, the greater the chance something will go wrong. So Lee asks why his neighbor visited, and she responds that she came to talk to him about the game and asks when he'll be available. Unsure, he says they can probably play in the morning. We see that Luna is hiding behind the wall, listening to their conversation, which is nearing its end. Han says it's settled. They'll play early in the morning. If Lee is late, he won't be forgiven. Before leaving, we see her ask for the protagonist's cell phone number. She can't come to his place in person every time she wants to talk. It's not every day our boy gets his celebrity's contact, so he asks if it's okay. Done. Their number is saved. Han was about to leave, but before she goes, she warns that if her messages aren't answered, well, you don't want to know what will happen. The protagonist says he understands. On the other side of the door, we see the girl having a mini meltdown. She finally got his number. Did everything go well? Maybe it was too sudden. Okay, better hurry up and send a message. Back inside Little Underpants' house, he wonders why all this is happening, especially in the middle of the night. Luna asks why he asked her to hide. It's not like they were doing anything weird. But the boy says that just having her there is unusual. Yep, folks, women don't miss a chance to go after Little Underpants. Sometime later, we see our black-haired goddess remembering what happened that day. After asking the protagonist to form a group with her, the young girl ends up being rejected by him, who asks why he should play with her since he was stabbed the last time. Besides, he is in a group with the love captain and would probably be beaten if he stopped participating. Then we see that our waifu is watching our protagonist and his colleague from afar. She says she is jealous, and that makes her want to ruin her. But this time, she will let it go as he will end up killing that woman anyway, and he will be her man. All this for the sake of the end of Chrono Life. Then we see the little dragon annoyed, saying that he can't carry her since the level difference is huge and it's impossible to do that. Then the young girl ends up noticing something strange and sees the protagonist talking to the wind. Thinking he's schizophrenic, she questions why he's talking to himself, leaving the protagonist confused, asking if she can't see this dragon project. However, the draconic spirit warns that only the protagonist can see it. But if he shares his mana, then the dragon could be instantiated into reality. The little boy questions if it will really work since his intelligence and wisdom are low, but the dragon confirms. So he starts injecting his mana into him, creating a huge purple lightning bolt. And Eurus' soul begins to be instantiated into reality. Seeing that light gathering in front of the protagonist, The young girl is extremely confused about what's happening as something begins to form, and our little dragon Urus appears in reality, making a very cute face, which is capable of delivering a fatal blow to the young girl, making her scream, the protagonist asking if she can pet him. But hearing these words, the dragon gets irritated, questioning how a mere human can dare to want to touch him. But the protagonist confirms that it's okay, and she heads towards him. Suddenly, he hears a voice calling him, and when he looks, he questions what he is doing there. Then we see that it is Habak next to a griffin. The Stitched One says that the situation got a little worse and he fled in a hurry to meet our protagonist. But the hero questions how he found him, discovering that this is one of his abilities. Practically, he creates a mirror with GPS capable of locating a person who has already been his opponent. Habak says it's not time to talk about that, and that right now that person is going to appear. But before continuing his sentence, the protagonist interrupts, saying that his arm has regenerated, discovering that it was his master who did it. Suddenly, the two feel a strong tremor, leaving the girl who is holding onto the little dragon like a teddy bear confused, while the Stitched One just gives a small smile and says he has arrived, his eternal master and also the master of the Great Throne, the one who is known as the Disaster of Laziness. The girl is impressed with all that and with those angelic armored soldiers, but the protagonist is quite alert with this disaster. At first he thought they would all be humanoid monsters like Habak, but his throne is immensely large. The Stitched One takes his griffin and goes to the throne, apologizing to his master since he didn't have time to explain the details to the hero. But the Disaster of Laziness says it's okay since he himself will explain the situation to him. Upon hearing this, Habak looks a little scared but soon understands the situation, as that gigantic throne falls and crashes violently to the ground in front of the protagonist, causing such a strong impact that it almost makes the two fly away. The God of Laziness says it is a pleasure to meet him since he has heard a lot from his subordinate and that apparently he is the current hero. Now seeing the real appearance of the God of Laziness, the protagonist is scared, while the man gives him a threatening look. Elsewhere, we see an abandoned temple. The previous goddess walks through this temple calmly until she finally finds her goal. Then we see that she is in front of a throne with someone sitting on it. This person is the first hero Suryopi, who has been dead for hundreds of years. She discovered that he was the first hero because of the game's description, since he was a legendary, complete, and familiar man. Suddenly the symbol on her forehead starts to glow. But our waifu already knew this would happen, and it's exactly as expected. Then she places the staff in front of her, and even without knowing who had the idea of creating such a childish and cliched story in the game, she still likes it a lot since that's the charm of Chrono Life. Her staff starts to glow a lot, and soon a golden aura begins to circulate her entire body. Meanwhile, near the beach, we discover that the Disaster of Laziness, one of the 7 deadly sins, contains the troop of the strongest angel tribe. He was also called the Great Merchant, a presence consistent with this huge throne made 100% of pure gold. However, the grand and majestic presence of the Disaster comes in the appearance of an angelic little boy, standing on a throne clearly very disproportionate to his size, leaving the protagonist and the love captain confused with this scene. While the little dragon calls him a brat, and that he continues with the same charisma as always even after they have known each other for so long. The Disaster starts to float and approaches the protagonist and his group. He introduces himself as the Great Merchant and Disaster of Laziness, asking if he is the hero that his subordinate mentioned. The little boy confirms that he is while wondering what this feeling of being tormented by a child is, but the child in front of him gives a scary look and says that the hero's level has dropped a lot, making the protagonist get irritated with these sudden insults. But before saying anything, he is hit by a kick from the Disaster, making a little ketchup splash from his mouth while he is confused. Soon the young man prepares another attack, delivering a spinning kick to his face and throwing him violently against a rock. Habak is confused by his master's actions, asking why he is attacking the hero since he was the one who helped him. But the lazy one tells him to shut up, since if he wanted to talk then he wouldn't have come. They are an existence that will always be the opposite of humans, and can't believe his subordinate unnecessarily approached him. Hearing this, the Stitched One is a little shocked by his master. But the protagonist stands up, saying that he is right and that a player and a monster will never be friends. So now that he made the first move, there is no problem in beating up a child. The Disaster still looks irritated and tells him not to be mistaken, since it was the protagonist who made the first move. Then he licks his leg and stomps the ground, creating a huge shockwave, reminding that the protagonist killed the capital sin of pride, Urus, and accelerated the whole process. Then throws a huge stone in his direction, and while preparing to hit it back, the protagonist asks why he is complaining about this now, destroying the rock with just one attack, which soon after turns into a huge shockwave, exploding everything in its path. Quickly, the little angel appears, saying that Urus was the strongest boss in the game. Then he kicks the protagonist in the belly and says that the sin of pride was supposed to be in the final raid of the main story, however he was killed, messing up the whole order. Moreover, the sin of gluttony also should not have been consumed that way and should have been defeated in 10 years. The young girl says that at that time it was Eurekan who attacked him first, while the protagonist only defended himself. But the lazy one just tells her to shut up, automatically making the young girl sweet cold. While with a threatening look, he questions how she dares to interrupt him. Falling to the ground out of fear, She wonders why she is feeling all this pressure inside a game and that she wasn't like that even when she faced Uriken. Little Eurus is watching all this with a neutral expression, until he notices something and starts staring at the little lazy one in front of him. He explains that Uriken was born because Eurus was killed, and in the end the protagonist caused all this. And the problem that has been growing since then will soon explode. The first hero Yopi, known as the strongest human in Chrono Life, will be resurrected soon. Then we see that this process has already begun to happen and a glowing aura begins to circulate the skeleton's body. While the goddess gives a small smile and says she knows it's not time to wake up yet, so she had to go there personally to share her powers with the dead. The aura that is circulating her body begins to reconstruct her armor, until it is 100% complete. The protagonist asks the young lazy one what the problem is with this guy resurrecting, since if he was a hero in the past, then he should be on humanity's side. But hearing this, the little angel sighs and says that the protagonist is dumber than he thought, explaining that the hero will not be resurrected as a human but as one of the 7 deadly sins. Annihilation will be his only purpose, so we see a symbol forming on the ground. Suddenly small cracks begin to form, and a skeletal hand comes out of it, showing itself in the form of a skeletal soldier. Suddenly the hall is already infested with several soldiers, while the goddess says that he is the strongest human and the first hero, the one who loved and trusted humans, but is the one who hates humans more than anyone. It really is a childish story, but perfect to represent the deadly sin he received. The undead army is already fully prepared, while Yopi presents himself as the first hero in the capital sin of wrath. The Chrono continent has existed since ancient times, a place where there are no wars, not even disputes, a blessed world full of peace. However, one day the demons appeared. They attacked the residents and decimated the houses. In an instant, the continent turned into hell. But at the time, a light appeared in the midst of disaster. This was Yopi, who was later called the first hero. But before the story continued, the protagonist jumps, as he is not a fan of hearing the game's stories, but understands that the dark hero was resurrected, yet the young man was there just to beat him up and say whatever he wanted. Our little boy says he defeated Eurus with just one punch, so he doesn't understand why he should worry about the first hero, much less why he should be afraid of him. The lazy one says that the protagonist is more foolish than he thought, and can't believe he doesn't know human fear even when he has won. So he warns that everyone will be attacked by the hero himself soon after turning to leave. The protagonist still questions where the boy is going, since he thought he had gone there to fight. But the lazy one says he was wondering about the current hero's situation, but it seems it was nothing serious, and leaves a warning that he walked alongside the hero Yopu, also being the only human he recognized. So he can confirm this very well, and the protagonist is not able to defeat him. But our hero just said that this made him more willing to beat him up, and while preparing an attack, he says he won't let him go so easily after being attacked. But before doing anything, he is stopped by the Stitch one, getting extremely irritated and ordering to be released immediately. But the guy tells him to calm down and that there's no need to fight since the conversation ended well. The protagonist remembers that he was just attacked, but still he asks him to calm down since he is making a lot of money selling items. He explains that the person who was buying all the protagonist's items was precisely the great merchant who spent 15 billion gold. Meanwhile, we see the face of a giant skeletal dragon along with the entire undead army of the hero. Speaking to Luna, he said he understands and that many years have passed since he died. She said he should have been resurrected much later. But the main story is already a mess, and since she has already provided enough mana, then he won't need to worry. The hero thanks and says he will repay her if he gets a chance later. Then our waifu asks where he is going, but the hero says she is asking the obvious. At that moment, the dragon starts to take off, and even with its wings entirely made of bones, it manages to fly through the skies. The skeletons also quickly advance towards something, and the great resurrected hero said that right now he is going to destroy the world he once protected, activating his instant teleport and simply disappearing in front of Luna. She gives a small sigh, while seeming happy that her work is finally over. But remembering the consequences of her actions, she wonders if everything is really okay. Something asks if she regrets and remembers that she did what she wanted in the case of Uriken. Luna replies that this is different from that time since that boy seems to be a shadow in the main story. Then the man who was talking to her apologizes and says they should just enjoy. Then he goes back to observing the entire planet of the game and seems curious to see how this world will be cleaned. We return to the beach and see the protagonist scared, while asking if it was really this boy who bought all the items he sold. The disaster says that to be exact, he spent 15303890000 gold, but later put them up for sale for a total of 51.7 billion, making a profit of 37 billion. Our little boy is amazed hearing that, even calling the little boy Hyun, soon after begging him to teach him the business tricks. Suddenly, the two start hearing a great tremor, but the little angel already knows what it means. Urvis and Han seem extremely scared by what they are seeing. Then the disaster of laziness warns that he has arrived, and as the skeletal dragon passes by the group, we find that this is really the end of the world. Even the protagonist seems scared seeing that. And so suddenly a war began. The skeletal soldiers advanced while eliminating the players from the initial village, Because of the alarming number of soldiers, they were not able to do anything, even wondering what this surprise attack is since monsters shouldn't invade the village as if it were nothing. Suddenly, a system message appears, explaining that this is a main mission in the game and that players must protect the world from the sin of wrath. While he is confused by the fact that there is a main mission in Chrono Life, the man with cat ears is attacked by a skeletal soldier. Soon everyone realizes that they don't have time to look at the mission window, otherwise they will end up dying. But the chances of survival are also not very high since there are monsters everywhere. The skeletal soldiers seem to laugh scarily, while the remaining players do their best to survive. The bald man wonders if the hero wasn't supposed to be on humanity's side, questioning why he would ruin life in Chrono Life. Then a mage appears casting a flaming hurricane, eliminating several skeletal soldiers at once. The people there recognize her as the strongest royal sorceress Abracadabra, and she explains that she received orders from the royalty to protect this sacred land. Seeing that the players who are completely injured start to feel hope, since the strongest sorceress and all the royal guards have been mobilized. Their response was quick and precise, much better than the last event against Gluttony. But a light starts to be emitted from the sky, and when they look they see the skeletal dragon preparing a large-scale spell. A flaming ball is created in its mouth and soon after fired at the city. We realize that the reason for the defeat is that they were not ready yet since this event was a main mission. And as it was supposed to happen in a few years in the future, the current players didn't have the resources to fight against it. So we go to the Hill of Heroes where the former hero and now the capital sin of wrath appears. He looks at the tomb of his friends while thinking that it has been a long time. The first tombstone has a musical instrument, so he remembers his companion who thanked him for letting her sing to the world. The second had a small wing, which represented the saint who always prayed for her companions. The third tombstone had a wizard's hat, which represented a man who didn't care about world peace and just wanted to be by the hero's side. Remembering his companions, the disaster begins to cry blood. The good memories he had with his companions are soon overshadowed by bad memories, and Yopi starts to release his aura while ordering the dead to resurrect. From the tombstones, 3 skeletons emerge, while the hero warns that he will not allow them to follow an honorable path like they did. The honorable wizard has part of his skull missing. The cleric has holes that represent crying under her eyes, and the bard has large scars on his jaw like someone who sang beyond his capacity. The hero with his blood-red eye and a threatening look orders his former companions to get ready, as it is time to end the story that never ended. Then we return to the protagonist picking his nose, and saying that this so-called hero will lose to the stick, just like the others. As he walks, he says it's been a while since he used the Intercontinental Strike. Then the disaster asks if everything will be okay since normal players can be caught by the attack and die. There is also an army of undead, and if his attack does not have the holy attribute, it will not work. So this powerful attack he prides himself on will also be useless, and when the server restarts, the army will still be alive. Warning that no matter how strong he is, he won't be able to face this war alone. The protagonist said that it seems fun, and will still try alone. The war will be stopped by him and his faithful squire. Then he prepares his wooden stick, disables the rebound control option, and with a great impact launches himself upwards, quickly flying towards the city like a superhero. The captain is confused, wondering where the little boy is, soon discovering that he used the rebound to fly away. The lazy one watches the protagonist going to the city while thinking that he likes his "I don't give a damn" attitude. The main village has now turned into a sea of flames, and the starting point of everyone's journey has now turned into a cemetery of players. All this because of a monster who managed to turn this once peaceful place into a city of death in the blink of an eye. Outside the game in a rental store, some people curse, saying that Chrono has gone crazy and that every time something like this happens. Hearing people's complaints, the part-time worker who is about to give up starts trying to calm them down, explaining that the server may have crashed and he should log in again. But soon an angry man explains that a skeletal dragon sprouted in the village, and if they log in they will die again. Actually, the man is so furious that he wonders if he should start playing something else. But the woman next to him says that this is more fun than mindlessly hunting every day. The guy who was previously irritated just hearing a woman talking starts to agree with everything she says, asking if she wouldn't like to play with him but being rejected right away. While observing his cell phone, he notices that the Chrono Life site has just released an update note. But when he reads the contents of the note, he gets scared, wondering if this is really an official notice. Soon everyone in the store also reads the note and starts debating whether they have gone crazy or something. And if this notice is true, it means that the game's server could end soon. At the president's office, a man says that this is madness, explaining that the main scenario cannot be completed with the current level of players, and that this is a problem that the company's management team should intervene. But the president questions if he is crazy. Recalling the company's policy of non-interference, the man still doubts his president's actions, reminding him of the notice he posted on the site, which said that the main scenario of Chrono Life has begun, and from now on the fate of the world will be determined by the players. If they fail this mission, the hero will win, and the Dark Age will be the new setting as all life will be massacred, explaining that the future of the game is in their hands. Returning to the game, we see the village in flames. while the skeletons who have already cleaned up the city just stand still, but soon they look at the sky seeing something strange. The meteor has just landed in the middle of the city, and from the smoke, we see that the meteor is actually the protagonist who says that traveling like this is fast, but landing is a problem. At that moment, he hears a piercing scream, and when he looks around, he sees that he is completely surrounded by skeletal soldiers, but he is just happy as he ended up in the right place. The soldiers advance to attack him, but just by swinging his stick, he manages to crush the skeletons' heads. Because of his momentary distraction, another ends up hitting him from behind. Soon, all the skeletons also pierce him with their swords, screaming and laughing happily that they managed to eliminate their enemy. But with a serious voice, the protagonist calls their attention, questioning what they are doing while we see that none of the swords manage to pierce his skin. Soon he eliminates all the skeletons that are there and says that they are all just flies, wondering if he put too many points in Constitution since his speed is crap and he couldn't dodge. Even seeing the defeat of their companions, a skeleton advances towards him, delivering an attack while the little boy opens the status window. The pure bone doesn't give up and continues to deliver attacks. But seeing that none of them work, he ends up giving up and just waiting for the protagonist to finish what he has to do. Observing his gluttony ability, he realizes he can absorb a target's stats. Then he starts giving malicious smiles, leaving the undead who watches scared. All the soldiers he had previously hit start to rise, while that weird tentacle comes out of his mouth. He says it's showtime, making the skeletons confused with that. The gluttony tentacle goes up, quickly advancing on one of the monsters nearby. He pierces the skeleton's bone and starts absorbing its stats. Then in a few seconds, the immortal skeleton turns to dust, while a notification saying that his stats have leveled up appears, making our hero extremely happy. His stats, which were previously low, start to quickly grow, and realizing that his strength increased by 220, now he can use equipment. Not believing, he left this stolen ability aside, but from now on he won't be so picky and will eat whatever is in front of him. Seeing that scary scene, the undead monsters, beings who are not exactly dead nor alive, lost the sanity they had, leaving only one thing, the purest natural instinct. They have the strongest immortal army who didn't even fear death, but only their instinct told them they should run for their lives. Meanwhile, the reason for their unexpected escape laughs maliciously, while we discover that they are running away simply out of absolute fear. Suddenly, we see the gluttony tentacle going towards the target and hitting the spine of one of the king's castle. There we see the hero and his group approaching, while he appears even more powerful than before. In the Great Hall of the Demon King, someone seems to recognize him, calling him the first hero who annihilated the Demon King. Yopi also knows who that creature is and praises the enormous vitality of the great demon's direct assistant. The ghost reminds him that his body is immortal, asking what brings a hero from decades past to this humble place. As he approaches, Yopi says his goal there is obvious. Then he stops in front of a large sword stuck in the ground, explaining that he came to that place for his precious item, the god-ranked hero's long sword. With a malicious look, the ghost asks if he will be okay, since the Demon King's energy was sealed in that sword, and by wielding it again, he probably already knows what will happen. The disaster, with a neutral expression, continues looking at her, while warning that he knows exactly what is going to happen, probably more than anyone else. Then he firmly grips the sword's handle, while the strong green energy begins to circulate the area. Then the system announces that a class change is happening with the hero and that he has awakened the hidden class. The sword, which initially had bright orange traits like the hero, slowly starts to be filled with green energy, while the little ghost seems quite pleased with what is happening. Yopi, now wielding his old sword, finally completes the class change, becoming the new Demon King. The demon assistant celebrates that a new king is born, while the disaster, now with a new appearance, stares at him, receiving the privileges of becoming a Demon King and having all his stats increased by 10 times. The hidden class also grants him a new ability called Demon King's Authority, capable of ruling all demon races. The former hero calls the little creature and says that this is his first order as Demon King, commanding him to summon the entire demon army immediately and annihilate the human world. With no expression on his face, the little ghost remains silent, but soon releases a smile, agreeing with his new lord, little by little transforming into smoke and rising through the ceiling. That gooey smoke starts to come out from the top of the tower, while maintaining a look of morbid happiness on his face. And soon we see that little being transform into a giant mass of black matter with a face. The new Demon King commands all units to advance, while Death opens a huge mouth full of sharp teeth, opening a dimensional portal leading to the human world. Then soon the human world and the demonic world, two dimensions that until now could not interfere with each other, and that only a few people knew the method of dimensional teleportation. The first person was the hero Yopi. Then we see the Captain Love looking at the sky, extremely scared. When the protagonist looks to see what made her like that, he also ends up having the same reaction. The third person capable of using dimensional teleportation is the direct assistant of the demon Death, and it was with this highly recognized ability that made him the direct assistant. From that crack linking the two dimensions, beings start to come out, with sharp teeth and a thirst for blood. That's how it began. The beginning of the demonic army invasion finally started. Thousands and thousands of demons start to come out through the portal, encountering that city in flames. The capital sin of Sloth sighs at seeing that scene, while questioning the level of anger of the former hero Yopi, and why he is doing all those things against humanity. However, the protagonist grabs his stick and, even seeing that scary scene, asks why he should care, while delivering an upward strike. Just swinging his stick made a huge burst of power be thrown upwards and cross the atmosphere. Content: the protagonist starts to sing, saying he made a great strike, but he gets scared of something. The portal seems to have become even bigger, while more demonic beings emerge. Luna warns that the demonic race possesses unique physical strength and physical abilities, besides an infinite source of magic in their horns. The demonic armies that are already strong alone have gained immortal bodies due to the energy they received from the new Demon King, warning that the demonic race and the undead are the strongest tribes, and not even gluttony could gather an army like that. After warning about the situation, she questions what our protagonist will do and how he will defeat the hero Yopi. Even so, our protagonist just stares at her. Then a magic circle appears at his feet, causing a great upward wind, while a ball appears in front of him. That ball condenses and forms a magic stone capable of creating the cleric's soul ability, and the protagonist uses it to activate the blessing on his staff, since the holy attribute is the best to deal with undead. Now, with a face of absolute pleasure, he again strikes upwards, taking a quite suspicious position while displaying his beautiful and radiant muscles. That horde of monsters is suddenly hit by something, and again the protagonist's attack is powerful enough to make that energy leave the atmosphere. Luna watches that scene in disbelief, while wishing she didn't have to witness that scene. The demon tribe is a tribe born with strong bodies and unlimited magic. Besides that, they receive more power from the new Demon King, achieving immortality. It was supposed to be the true strongest tribe, Chrono Life. However, it was practically wiped out in just one attack. This scene leaves Death completely scared, while the protagonist laughs, saying they are nothing but weak monsters who die to attacks with holy attributes. And as he's getting bored, he orders the hero Yopi to appear soon. Suddenly, the smoke starts to gather in some points, and the demonic monsters again begin to regenerate, scaring our protagonist when he sees that scene, since in a few moments all of them recover completely. The young man wonders what they are, since they can resurrect even after being hit with holy attribute strikes, but it's answered that this is a hero's ability, and as long as he has mana left, the demonic army will never die. Lee says it will be difficult to fight until the hero's mana runs out, but he just has to make an infinite loop of sanctified strike upwards. To avoid seeing that horrible scene that almost made her gouge her eyes out, Luna recommends he go fight the hero directly. But Lee says he has no idea how to get to the demon world. Hearing this, the captain suggests going through the portal they came from. Since their enemies are coming from the demon world, the portal must lead directly to it. However, the waifu warns that the portal is a one-way hole, and if he enters from this side, he will probably die disintegrated. Getting angry with Han and telling her to shut up, hearing her rival insulting her, the young woman asks who she thinks she is to keep mocking her, noting that no player has been to the demon world to begin with. But at that moment, Lust questions who gave this information, since she, as a goddess, can use dimensional teleportation to the demon world, then extends her hand to the protagonist, telling him to hold it since the reason she came there was to take him to the disaster. Hearing this, the protagonist questions if that was really the reason since she just gave him an item. But before he finishes his sentence, he realizes something. As she said, she deactivated God mode not to be observed, so it means no one should know about him. Finally, he holds the girl's hand and accepts her ride to the demon realm. Seeing that scene, Han questions if he's serious and if he trusts this woman. He says he has no choice and it's not like there's another way to get to the hero. Meanwhile, Luna is quite embarrassed, since our hero is holding her hand. Then the young woman gives a little smile, while calling the protagonist to go to his goal. The captain shouts asking if she can't take her along, but it's too late and a magic circle appears beneath the two. While a disaster of lust says they are already at maximum capacity and can only take one person in her teleportation, touching the protagonist's shoulder while saying she will enjoy the meeting alone. Seeing the two finish the dimensional teleportation and simply disappear from her sight, the captain seems quite displeased with this, while deciding that from now on, this woman will be her rival. In the demon world, the great demon king's castle presents itself, as the protagonist finally arrives at the location, questioning if they are really inside the demon castle, and starts to look around a bit more, coming across the hero and his subordinates. But Yopi, who is now a disaster, responds that there is no more hero. In this body, there is only fury, and from now on, as one of the 7 deadly sins, he will annihilate these filthy and sordid humans. Suddenly, a huge explosion is seen from the castle, and we realize that it is obviously coming from the protagonist, who just tried to skip the dialogue again, but ended up destroying everything in his path, including the hero and his subordinates. He looks at the waifu saying they're done here, so they should return to the village. But she says it's not over yet, and it's just beginning, making the protagonist confused with her words. Suddenly, the hero says that's amazing, and that not even the last Demon King had such a powerful attack. Realizing that he dodged his attack, the protagonist is confused since his attributes are maximized. But while preparing to attack him with his sword, the disaster says that evasion doesn't just depend on attributes, and launches a huge slash with demonic energy at the protagonist, explaining that the pulse reflection, the look, and even the opponent's breathing are things that help predict the movement and dodge strikes. But what he didn't know is that our protagonist was already behind him while saying he will remember that. Yopi wonders how he got there so fast, attacking again with his sword, but the only thing he hits with this attack is the air. And while thinking he disappeared again, he hears a voice coming from the ground. Then we see that the protagonist quickly sneaked under his legs and is staring at him with this scary look. The warrior tries to stab him with his sword but misses, and we realize that all this is just a joke for our protagonist, since with his extremely high agility, mocking the hero became extremely easy. Yopi looks at him with a lot of aggressiveness. Meanwhile, in the human world, demons continue attacking Han. She runs desperately for her life, while screaming that the protagonist is a jerk for leaving her alone. During the escape, she ends up tripping, falling violently to the ground as she crawls. Soon the demonic creature reaches the girl lying down, and goes for a fierce attack against her. But while lying on the ground, she remembers the previous events, getting extremely irritated and preparing to counterattack. Just remembering that woman trying to steal her man makes her blood boil. Then she hits the creature's stomach with an extremely powerful punch. We know that the level of the demons must be at least above 100, while Han is only at 25, so she shouldn't inflict damage, but the gauntlets she possesses have a power that surpasses the level difference, and with just one attack, that creature is knocked down. This power is the hidden ability of the Transcendental Gauntlets, which automatically alters her attack attribute to the enemy's weakness. Some system messages start to appear that she gained experience and leveled up. The experience was so much that from level 25 she went up to 39, since the XP from the demonic army is overwhelming. And with the efficiency of high XP and the main mission bonus, one can gain even more experience than from most bosses. But the truth is that the young woman doesn't care about any of this and just wants to vent her anger on them. However, when she looks up, she realizes that the real problem is the magnitude of the army. She then stops her relentless attacks, while sighing quite stressed with the protagonist, saying that she will finish him off when she gets back. Meanwhile, in the demon castle, the protagonist and the hero stare at each other. Yopi says that he is strong and that he surpasses him in strength and agility, assuming then that the other attributes also surpass him, but the protagonist has already said that all his attributes are maximized, and if he understood the situation well, he should die immediately and stop wasting time. The hero remembers that in the past all his battles were fierce and with almost no chance of victory. Then his former companions who were brought back from the dead appear, and he says that with this group they always manage to win. The protagonist and the little dragon look at that scene, realizing that the guy just called his gang for a one-on-one fight, then says that heroes shouldn't do this and should have a fair one-on-one. Luna suddenly tells him to be careful, saying that the hero group's raid success rate is 100%, asking again for the protagonist to form a group with her. At this moment, we go back to the moment when Captain Love was attacked, but for some reason the creature's attack didn't hit her, since the monster's paw was cut off before it happened. Hannah's confused, trying to understand what happened, while the monster looks at its severed leg and starts to cry out in pain, letting out a loud roar soon after. The one who made this cut and saved the young woman was Captain Hong, who quickly unleashes hundreds of attacks on the demon, cutting it entirely, and quickly finishing it off while its pieces fall to the ground. She then gets up and asks if Miss Hannah's okay, being extremely happy to see her friend. But these good moments won't last forever. As that horde of creatures was advancing against the two, Hong is impressed that so many rare demons are appearing in the human world, and that this seems like a war of humans against demons from classic games, again reaffirming that Chrono Life is very fun, but leaving Han confused about what she's talking about. The guild leader tells her members to attack, telling them to cancel their occupation and show combat mode to protect the initial village. Since the enemies were blessed with immortality, they should sprinkle holy water on their weapons and fight, since the battle against the demon tribe has begun. Soon several assassins from the Robin Hood tribe begin to advance, quickly eliminating the demons that were advancing. Han says that this is the famous Robin Hood guild summon she heard about and that it's her first time seeing it. Actually, Han says this is the second time she's done this since she became the third leader, as the first was in the fight against her boyfriend. Hearing the woman's words, the young woman is happy that she thinks the two are a couple. But suddenly, the conversation is interrupted by an arrow that is shot, piercing several demons at once. Han looks back already knowing who did it, and then the man reveals himself as the leader of the Justice Hawkeye's Guild. He says he received a report from the Sentinels and informs that the Justice Guild will also participate in this war. Seeing two of the great guilds unite to fight together, the young woman is happy, but this is not all. Hong says this is an all-out war, and soon we see the Divine Guild, the Cross Guild, and the Holy Land Guild approaching, and soon a huge human army is formed in the fight against the demonic army. Those beasts with no humanity continue advancing fiercely, while the human players fight to protect the game they love so much. Inside the demon world, there is also a war going on. The skeleton bard starts playing a song, activating the thunderous ability Seraphim's Chant. Soon musical notes fill the entire Demon King's hall, impressing the protagonist, while the waifu says that the thunderous ability is a song that beats in the rhythm of time, notifying that the hero's group has finally started the raid and that you should form a group. Noticing the insistence of that woman, the protagonist flips her off while cursing her, replying that he doesn't want to form a group and doesn't know what she's plotting. However, to deal with a group of idiots like this, he alone is enough. Then quickly prepares for an advance, rushing for an attack. In just a few moments, Lee approaches the hero's group, facing the bard. This speed is so overwhelming that no one could react, and he says he is just following the rule of focusing on the supports first, but before he can hit, his staff is stopped by the great hero, who quickly managed to react to his speed, and with a simple movement of his sword, manages to deflect the trajectory of the protagonist's strike, making that immense attack land elsewhere. Euros says that he deflected the attack by spinning the sword blade, but the waifu warns that it was the perfect parry, a skill the hero acquired after much training. However, it's a skill that fails if you're a millisecond late, so if you keep attacking, you can overcome it. But suddenly, the Seraphim's Chant is activated, and due to the time fluctuation, the speed of the group members increased. The hero takes advantage of the buff to attack the protagonist, who manages to defend himself and says that even though he's gotten faster, it's still not enough. But he probably spoke too soon, since his little pet dragon is quite scared looking at something. The reason for this fear is the hero, who increases power even more using the hidden skill Hero's Glory, which sacrifices a large portion of his strength and temporarily doubles all other attributes. At this moment, the disaster advances towards the protagonist with the aim of eliminating him, trying to land several attacks on him while he only defends himself. Yopi well represents his capital sin and shows a lot of anger in each of his attacks, while the protagonist just defends against all of them, realizing that this is practically like playing with an angry cat. But soon his attention shifts to something else, noticing that the team's mage is preparing a spell in his direction. Suddenly, the skull spell is finished, and a giant whirlwind begins to form above the protagonist. Suddenly, the mage pulls an Uchiha Madara and summons a meteor, which quickly falls towards the castle. The protagonist thinks this is that OP arcane spell, and this is his first time seeing it in person. With his current agility, he could easily dodge this attack, but while preparing to deflect the meteor, he thinks it wouldn't be fun if he did that. And soon we see a great explosion comparable to a nuclear one coming from the castle. And with it, the protagonist remains intact while the meteor's debris starts to fall. Now that you manage to defend against another enemy attack, he asks if there is anything else to show, getting frustrated imagining that they have run out of tricks and telling them to stop wasting his time and finish it. Yopi, who was supposed to be the final villain, seems quite tired, but says that unfortunately, they're just getting started. Quickly, a huge rainbow light begins to surround the hero's group, and Seraphim's chant verse 2 is finally activated. This skill has a hidden effect capable of having the enemy's attributes, and soon all the protagonist's stats that were at 99 drastically drop to 49. Yopi responds that this is his trump card, and with his attributes being multiplied by 10 due to the hidden Demon King class plus the Bard's buff, they are now on par, notifying that even if the protagonist uses Gluttony with his perfect parry, those disgusting tentacles won't reach him. And now he asks the same question, wondering if the protagonist has shown everything he has. Our hero just looks at all of this without showing a reaction, but suddenly starts laughing while wondering if he should use that. These words awaken curiosity in the resurrected hero, while Euros knows he will probably use the hidden ability the passive boy used. Our protagonist then starts to pull something out of his coat, and when he pulls it out, it totally startles the little dragon, realizing that in his hands is Habak's mirror. Activating the hidden ability 8 Visions, the protagonist's body starts to vibrate, and soon also starts to grow larger and larger. The hero and his group look at that scene in fear. Then the demon world, which is a dimension far from the human world, had its symbolic black sky changed to a white sky. So we return to the war of humans against demons. Without any hesitation, Han advances to battle against her opponents, jumping at high speed while spinning in the air, finishing the demonic creature with a beautiful kick to its face. She lands softly on the ground as the creature falls. And again, another level up notification appears, and now we see that Love is at level 74. Looking up, she realizes that even having eliminated several, they keep coming. Even wondering if she's going crazy, as it seems there are more now than before. But Hong tells her she's not crazy and that usually demons can be exterminated with holy attacks, but with the Demon King's protection, they are all reviving. To make matters worse, Yopi has infinite mana, so none of them will die until he himself is eliminated. The captain complains, saying that the main scenario missions should be difficult and not impossible. But soon something catches her attention. Quickly coming from the sky, a demonic creature appears aiming to devour her. And even tired, the young woman prepares to counterattack. Suddenly, we see someone's staff glowing, and a woman using flame magic, who shoots a giant fireball, piercing the demonic creature in the middle, and easily eliminating it. The mage says there is only one condition to complete the mission. That is by defeating Yopi, the Sin of Wrath. Hearing this, Love questions the point of the war, as they could just log out and wait for Kuquinha to defeat him. But soon she is informed that if they do that, then all the plants, animals, and humans living in this world would die. And if that happened, this world would also become a demonic world. Even scared, she thinks the game company could fix it with an update, but Hong reminds her of the announcement they made, mentioning that from today on, the world's fate will be determined by the main mission results, and the game's future is in the player's hands. This literally means that for the first time in gaming history, everything, even the game itself, depends on the players. Then we see the headquarters of the Chrono Life Company. There we see the company owner watching everything happening inside the game, determined to abandon it if things go wrong. While calling them crazy, she says this is a lazy way to manage the game, wondering how on earth the #1 gaming company in the world doesn't have a solution. But soon the guild leader says that's exactly why she likes this game so much. However, Love is completely against these ideas and says the other players need to know too. But before she can finish her sentence, she's interrupted by Hong eliminating a demon in front of her. Abracadabra appears, asking the young woman not to worry, as most regular players are already aware, and that's why everyone is participating in the war. Then we see a bald man and his group attacking a demon. Knowing that his weakness is in its head, they all band together to try to knock down its leg first. Seeing this scene, Han is happy to realize that it's not just the top 5 guilds fighting, while the mage compliments, explaining that everyone has been fighting together from the beginning to protect the fate of this world. But soon reality shows itself, with the man extremely happy with the unique item drop. All the players are there only because they can use the high XP demon monsters to farm experience and items. Seeing this grotesque scene of players like lunatics against the demon, the two remain silent. Then we return to the protagonist's battle, where the supposed final villain is extremely scared. While looking at the protagonist's underwear that is gigantic in the demon world sky, the skeletal bard continues to play his melody, activating more effects of Seraphim's chant that reduce the enemy's attributes to a 5th. Seeing this, the little dragon complains that this skill is too overpowered and that the protagonist's healing factor should cancel it. Then we see that the skill not only immediately recovers any damage received, but gives complete immunity to status effects. However, Luna reminds that this is not a status effects skill, but one that reverses the target's time. Still, Kuquinha, who is now Kuko, is out of his reach. Soon a voice is heard from the sky calling the Demon King Yopi, questioning if it was perfect parry, the name of the skill he used earlier. Actually, this is quite interesting as it completely negates the enemy's attack. But with this scary expression while emerging from the clouds, he tells the hero to try using it once more. The final villain now finds himself at a complete disadvantage looking up, while the protagonist, already practically the size of the demon planet, prepares a downward strike, quickly swinging his stick, which in comparison to the castle is extremely gigantic, getting closer and closer to that structure. While the Demon King and his group can only watch it approach, Yopi, frightened, watches the devastating attack, finally accepting his sad defeat, as the wooden stick hits the castle squarely, not only destroying it but the entire demon planet, which soon explodes in a supernova with the protagonist still on top. A notification explaining that he pushed the amplifier lenses to the extreme appears, and Lee, now drifting through space, finally shrinks back to his normal size, looking at his magic mirror and seeing it's already broken. He looks at all the damage caused and thinks he destroyed a planet again, but this time the server didn't crash. The little Eurus approaches, saying he's back to normal size and explaining that he only survived the attack because he's a spirit. Soon another survivor also catches his attention. It's the goddess questioning how he will deal with the consequences of his actions. Lee is confused, wondering how she didn't die, and quickly begins to look around, fearing the hero might have survived too. Soon he sees Yopi sitting on a part of the castle that remained. However, he is completely beaten up and his armor totally destroyed. The protagonist only says that he is really tough since he didn't die after the explosion. But Limit explains that the hero will soon die as he is on the verge of death. Even his companions have returned to the void, so he will probably be next. Kukwina asks if this is true, saying he will now complete the main mission. Approaching the fallen hero, he explains that he won't need to do anything as the man will be finished on his own. And he said he knows that as he can barely keep his eyes open. So our comedian takes the opportunity to tease his enemies, saying he is weak. And Yopi complains that today's heroes have no manners, much less humility. Even so, Lee is probably the strongest person he has ever encountered, admitting he was completely defeated. Back in the initial village, the demon's rampant attack continues. The creatures advance fiercely towards the players, who are already quite fatigued due to the long battle time, being easily eliminated by the monsters. Actually, the battle that until now was tied begins to suffer a unilateral victory on the demon's part. An Archer Guild member warns his leader that they are being pressed, but he asks them to hold firm and endure, since their role in this battle is not to win but to buy time until that guy defeats Yopi. Even already accepting that after the battle they will suffer irreparable losses but must endure as long as possible. Love is shown to be quite tired of the battle, sighing, and with her clothes quite torn and dirty due to the battle, she no longer has the strength to stand. Seeing her friend on the ground, Hong asks if she's okay, while the young woman tries to stay strong, saying she will return to the fight as soon as she recovers. But when looking at her true state, she realizes something. The reason she can't fight anymore is that the girl has already reached her mental limit. Not just her, but everyone present is already exhausted, and if this continues, the entire initial village will be destroyed. At this moment, the Robin Hood Guild captain is caught off guard by a demon, who starts to press her, greatly reducing her HP. And when she is about to give up the fight, a hand simply begins to crumble in the air, leaving Hong very confused with this situation, while seeing all the demonic creatures present starting to vanish in the sky. Like the day Thanos snapped his fingers, all the monsters simply turned to dust. Hong, still looking up and confused about the situation, wonders what's going on, while Love seems to know exactly the situation. If the monsters are disappearing, it's probably because Kukwina managed to win. At this moment, we see the protagonist looking at Yopi's body, now shining a lot. He says his time is up and he will soon disappear. But Lee has a question to ask before he disappears, questioning why the hero who once killed the Demon King in the past hates humans so much. Yopi only comments that this is a boring and quite cliche story, explaining that actually it was because he was extraordinary. Because of that, everyone around him loved him, but those same people invite him. Then small drops begin to fall to the ground, as the hero says that actually he is just a person who loves humans. Observing from afar, the goddess remains neutral, while listening to the hero's last words. Realizing he was someone who loved humans more than anyone, like an explosion of lights, the hero disappears, and system notifications saying he managed to complete the mission alone appear. With them, the reward for completing the main scenario also appears in front of him. As he grabs that treasure chest, new messages appear saying he is the mission's top contributor, so he will receive an additional reward. Suddenly, a strong light begins to shine in space, and when it gets closer, it ends up surprising our protagonist. He arrives saying it's been a long time since they last met and didn't expect to see him so soon. This person is obviously the self-proclaimed god. He praises the protagonist, saying he always watched and was sure he would win against Yopi. He will also give the additional reward for being the top contributor in the mission. Then a screen appears in front of the protagonist, and when he reads the information on it, he is surprised, as it's an invitation to advance to the Capital Sin class. God comments that he can remain human or become a disaster, explaining that the hero also received the same reward when he defeated the Demon King, but he chose to be human and eventually had a terrible death. Eventually, as we know, he was reborn as one of the 7 deadly sins filled with fury against humans. But that's already too much story, and the only thing he wants is for the protagonist to make his choice now. Our Cupid looks at that man with a bit of anger in his eyes, soon reflecting on what he should do. But the truth is he doesn't even need to think about his choice, then presses one of the options, while behind the goddess and the dragon coast watch. She seems to have seen what the protagonist chose, while the little dragon tells her to move aside so he can see too. Surprised by the protagonist's choice, Luna just watches in shock, while God seems quite displeased, questioning him why he made that choice. But that should have been quite obvious given his personality. The next day, we see the protagonist's residence building, while he is just lying on his bed vegetating. Suddenly, his phone starts ringing, catching his attention, and when he goes to see who it is, he realizes he received a message from Han Sarang asking what he is doing. Kukwenha responds that he was just vegetating, while the young woman complains that he was acting like an NEET for doing that so often. But that ends up irritating the protagonist, who considers himself a legend for what he did and also needs to rest from time to time. Then Han warns that her class will end soon, and if he isn't doing anything, they should go out to eat later. Reading this unexpected message, the protagonist is startled, while wondering if she sent the message to the wrong person since there's no reason for her to make this invitation out of the blue. But suddenly, our waifu appears beside him while warning that the young woman is flirting with him. However, the protagonist hasn't realized the situation yet and only says that students should focus on their studies. Suddenly startled while wondering what she's doing in his apartment, and falling to the floor shortly after, while the young woman tells him to be careful as it must hurt to fall out of bed. Irritated, he says he only fell because of her, while asking how she managed to get into his house again without him noticing, telling her not to try to change the subject, otherwise he will report her to the police for invasion. Luna hands over a folded shirt while explaining that he's too hasty, as she only came there to return the shirt she borrowed earlier. But of course this confuses Kukwenha since he doesn't remember lending any clothes to her. However, he ends up recalling his last meeting with her in real life, and realizing that the young woman was wearing his shirt that time. Luna explains that she ended up borrowing it from his closet without him noticing, but quickly changes the subject, questioning what he will do now, since he received an invitation to go out to eat, immediately saying she also wants to go. The woman's cheekiness is such that it leaves Kukwenha completely stunned, but convincing her otherwise is also very difficult, and soon we see Han extremely irritated in the restaurant, while Luna calmly eats her food. Our innocent young protagonist is between the two, while clearly knowing he made a mistake by letting her come. Han calls his name, completely scaring him, and with an extremely frightening expression questions what this woman is doing there, since this dinner was supposed to be just the two of them. He tries to change the subject, saying the three of them often meet in the game, so he thought it would be nice to eat together, but soon wonders why he's making excuses since he did nothing wrong. In the end, he only met that woman, so he doesn't need to care about her presence. Hearing her beloved's words, the evil spirit inhabiting this woman's heart attacks, and she questions what he is talking about, since a little while ago the two were lying side by side on the bed. Against these facts, our hero has no arguments, and Han automatically appears asking what she meant by that in a threatening tone while he just thinks he had a good life. Sighing, Luna says she couldn't understand this situation very well, as frankly, the two are not dating, so there is no reason for Miss Love to question the protagonist this way. But she counters the argument saying they are group mates, and there's no problem taking care of her companions. Then again questions what her relationship with Kukwenha is, even calling her a stalker. Luna says that Mr. Loser and she have a very special relationship, both in reality and in the game. These words end up reminding the protagonist of what happened in his last meeting with her, and the big kiss the young woman gave him. Nervous, Lee only says he's not so sure about that, saying that doesn't count since it was in the game and not in reality. But she said that every sensation in Chrono Life is exactly like reality. Even so, she approaches asking if they should use this opportunity to compensate for the sensation. But soon they are interrupted by the captain shouting and telling them to stop doing that in a public place. Also asking them to stop saying things only they know, questioning what is this story about comparable sensation to reality. But soon their thoughts meet and the penny drops, immediately realizing what those two did inside the game. And with a trembling voice tries to confirm the hypothesis in her head, while Luna doesn't even wait for her to finish, saying that it was exactly that, and that she thought she was just a cute little girl who didn't understand anything but seems quite mature. Han, extremely irritated, gets up from the table, while with a cold look says she is leaving. The waifu only laughs seeing her rival leave, while the protagonist only says she should eat quickly and go too. Then a few hours pass and the day is already turning to night. The young woman with a smile says she is already full, thanking the protagonist since the restaurant was really good, but that next time she will take him to a place she knows. Suddenly the young woman stops while still staring at him, while remembering that this scene is the same as the last time when the sun was also setting. She is referring to their first meeting, soon questioning about his choice of reward he got for being the top contributor. Our Kukwenha questions why she is asking that since he explained the reason just yesterday. But the young woman thinks he has some hidden motivation like love for Han Sarang, imagining that maybe she is the reason for his choice. Our hero only keeps his unshakable face hearing this, while saying he has no idea what she's talking about, saying goodbye right after. Sometime later, he reconnects to Chrono Life again, being welcomed by Euros, who greets him. While complaining that it took him an entire day to log in this time, the little ghost starts looking around, realizing this is an alley in the initial village and wondering why they are there. Probably because the demon world is gone, but that's also great since no one is passing by and he can just stay there relaxing nicely. The dragon is confused by this as he could rest in reality, but our protagonist's reality is quite troubled at the moment. Soon after, a wooden stick falls beside him, making the protagonist quite confused while looking at who threw it, soon realizing it was the young boy he met at the beginning of the game. Excitedly, the little character jumps while saying hi, but our hero seems extremely frightened by his presence. At this moment, it's already night and we see Chrono Life's headquarters, where the president is watching something with great attention. This something is obviously our protagonist meeting the young boy. A member questions what he will do about that, but the man only wishes to continue monitoring, while thinking he can't believe this meeting happened now all possible times, calling that child a toy of God. Inside the game, the protagonist says it's a pleasure to see him again, asking how long it's been. But we realize he got too excited and is shaking the child up and down hard. Soon he asks him to sit down while saying he didn't expect to find him there, again questioning how much time has passed. The little one is confused by his words while our hero realizes he might not remember, explaining that the last time they met was when he tried to reinforce the equipment but failed, but the young boy still doesn't seem to remember. Suddenly an idea comes to his mind and it seems he finally remembers. But the truth is he just thinks the protagonist looks like the golden statue in the village. Euros, observing that, questions who this little bald guy is, leaving the young boy very excited while the protagonist asks if he can see him. But soon the little dragon reminds him that he borrowed his power to materialize back then. Lee then introduces his pet dragon while offering the boy to hold him. Again, the proud dragon questions how a mere human dares to lay hands on him, but the protagonist tells him to shut up while the young boy grabs him. He then holds his big stick in his hand, while talking about the day he received it as a gift from the little bald guy, thanking him immensely since thanks to him his life was completely changed. Lee then questions if the young boy would like to hear some of the things he's been through. The little bald guy seems quite curious, while the protagonist explains all the story's events up to that point. Actually, this is quite fascinating and one of the rarest things in his life. As someone who doesn't like stories, he had never told his own to anyone, but at that moment he is telling everything he went through, even his most intimate feelings. So after a few hours of long conversations, he gets to the part where he had to choose between staying human or becoming a capital sin, making a small suspense while questioning him what his answer is. But the excited young boy has no idea, and the protagonist explains he preferred to stay human, making the little boy question the reason for that as he got curious. But as he gets up, Kukenhe says he will tell that story later, since he has something to give him first, then makes a strong invocation, spreading several transcendent rank items on the ground. He said it's a gift, telling the little bald guy to take them all since he doesn't need them. But humbly the young boy refuses, saying he doesn't need them either, while the protagonist doesn't understand why, as they are quite valuable. The little bald guy then takes a paper and writes something, handing it to the protagonist right after. Lee reads the letter's content, being surprised. Then the scene cuts to a large hospital, since that paper the boy gave him had an unknown address, and at that address someone was unexpectedly waiting for him. When he finally opens the door ready to find out who the player behind the character is, he faces the only person who shared his stories, the only one he opened up to, and realizes that the boy was actually a young girl diagnosed with an incurable disease and had only 2 weeks to live. The two stare at each other in that hospital room, while our protagonist seems extremely shocked by all that, but the little girl just gives him a charismatic look, giving small pats on the bed, asking him to come closer. So obeyingly grabs a nearby chair to approach the girl's bed, while she takes a notebook to write a message. The reality is she feels very sorry and knows he is probably surprised by all of this. She didn't want to seem rude but really wanted to meet him, so she gave the address. Besides, her body isn't very well, so she can't speak, but the protagonist only says she doesn't need to apologize for that. Again, the girl writes in her notebook, saying the stories he told in the game were very exciting, so she would like Appa to hear hers. Of course, they might not be as exciting, but still, she would like to have this selfish request fulfilled. Lee gives a small sigh at the child's motivation, stating that this is not selfish, and that since he has free time and likes to hear stories, he will stay there to listen. But the girl knows he hates stories as he always skips dialogues in games. So the girl explains there is a very wide variety of classes in Chrono Life, and among all the options, the one the girl chose was to become a merchant. As a merchant, she could talk to a lot of different people as she bought and sold items. And since in real life she never had many friends because she was shy, in the game she could be someone completely different. Everyone in the initial village treated her super well with radiant smiles, and it was thanks to them that every day was amazing. Then we see the association president. He said the girl was really kind and graceful. Whenever she had the chance, she gave potions to novices for free, even knowing she would lose money selling the items at a banana price, Technically, she didn't have the aptitude to be a merchant. But everyone liked that child, not only the players, but even the NPCs. Maybe she wasn't the game's most brilliant player, but she was the light of a star that delicately illuminated the environment around her. But one day, she stopped logging into the game. People thought she might have gone to focus on her studies or was taking a break. Everyone found different reasons to miss that child, and without even realizing it, a lot of time had passed. Those people who used to accompany her leveled up and left the initial village. As new players appeared, almost no one knew her in that village. But one day, that child returned to the game. However, her appearance had changed a lot since the last time. She no longer had her beautiful pigtails and was wearing the cheapest clothes in the game. But her acts of charity continued, and she kept giving items to new players. But this time, she never said anything to them and only sent emoticons. Probably she must have given all the items in gold in her inventory. As she started giving the stick you could get for free in the shop, the man who received the child's gift was not pleased at all, throwing it on the ground while saying he got excited because he discovered someone was giving things for free. That child looks at her gift on the ground, but keeps her joy and picks it back up. Suddenly, she hears someone screaming in complete despair, coming from an alley right beside her. When a young girl goes to investigate what it is, she sees the protagonist completely dismayed, looking at all the items he tried to enhance on the ground, while tears fall from his eyes. She realizes this might be the perfect moment to gift someone, so she decides to approach him to give him the stick. This was the end of the girl's story, but the beginning of the protagonist's. The story of our Kyukunha and the level 999 stick. To tell the truth, she tried to act as if everything was fine, but when she found out she was in the terminal stage, she couldn't hold back her tears. She wondered if she would ever see her old friends again, but she was afraid they would eventually forget about her. And even though most sick people wish for miracles, that is not her wish. In fact, all she wants is for someone to remember her when she's gone. A few hours later, we see the city again, and someone running quickly through it. That someone is obviously the protagonist, who is clearly very upset after what he heard. He finally arrives at his building and grabs his virtual reality glasses, automatically logging into Chrono Life. His spawn location, unlike last time, is the demonic world. And without giving the monsters time to prepare, he starts his frantic advance, striking and eliminating hundreds of demons at once. They evaporate in the air as the shockwave from his baton reaches the sky. He continues giving several attacks recklessly, creating a rain of explosions in the demonic realm. The little drive-in watches everything, scared by what his master is doing, since this is his first time seeing him expressing all of his emotions so fiercely. And as he doesn't know what happened outside the game, he can't understand why he started killing the monsters like that. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues his frenzied attack, remembering the last conversations he had with the young girl. He asked her if there was any way to cure her, by performing surgery, for example. The girl looks at him and explains that her disease is very rare and few people have it. For this reason, the surgery costs would be astronomical, and her parents have already said they would try their best to get the money. However, our protagonist says he will pay for the surgery. Millions or even billions, he doesn't care. He just wants her to have the surgery. Back in the game, there are no more monsters near the protagonist. His pet dragon seems to be afraid of its own master. And even with all stats maxed out, the effort was so much that he becomes breathless. Meanwhile, we see that after he said he would pay, an absolute silence filled the hospital room. The girl seemed to want to say something, but soon dismisses the idea and asks him not to give her false hopes, as she doesn't want to be more miserable on the train of false hopes. Even if the surgery works, it won't be the end of the disease, and the probability of survival is only 30%. Still, the protagonist says it's still worth trying, as it's better than giving up and doing nothing for 2 weeks. These words impact the girl, who remains silent while asking him to stop talking as if it were something simple. She's not a game item that can be fixed and repaired in the blink of an eye. Anyway, 30% is enough reason to at least try. But what will happen if she doesn't survive the surgery? He just said it would be better than just giving up and doing nothing for 2 weeks. But what if instead of living for 2 weeks, she dies on the day of the surgery? Lee asks her not to worry about these useless things, as she will surely survive. But this only makes the desperate girl start to cry, while she continues to write quickly in her notebook. As she had already said, things are not as simple as he says, and explains that when you are sick, the whole world collapses. Your family, friends, and everything close to you fall apart, while what remains is just a lonely void. But this void is something the protagonist understands well. At this moment, we return to the game, and suddenly, we see someone approaching. The little drive-in looks back to try to identify who it is. Then we see the goddess waifu running to approach the protagonist. Gura says they have been meeting a lot lately, and the goddess replies that she also hates appearing all the time, as she feels her mysterious vibe disappearing. Then she leans on the protagonist's shoulder, while saying that the reason for her coming is to do him a favor. Lee remains silent for a while, but soon asks if she brought what he asked for, which is confirmed by her. He then looks determined while telling her to continue with the plan. In the late afternoon, we see the little girl's hospital again, and in her room, she is curled up in her own feet, reflecting on the whole conversation they had earlier. She is trembling because she's afraid that things might go wrong, but her real disappointment is that everyone has already forgotten about her. And for the first time, the girl breaks down like the real child she is while thinking she is scared. But at that moment, a hand approaches. We see it is the protagonist holding the girl's shoulder. Raising her face, she looks and wonders when he got there. But soon after, she is extremely scared by something she sees. Her hospital room is crowded with people. Meanwhile, the protagonist says that as he said, no one will forget her. The girl seems so shocked she can't even open her mouth to speak, while looking at a girl thanking her for the sweet potato and saying that because of her, she changed her class. These two girls were the same ones who bought from her when she was a merchant. Another woman says that the weapons she bought from her are still used by her group, and that she wanted to thank her, but when she went to the initial village, she was no longer there. Then we realize that they never forgot that little girl. Because of the emotion of the moment, she can't hold back her tears and starts crying with happiness, seeing that everyone is there for her. The love from everyone there is extremely contagious and wasn't forgotten even by the time they spent without seeing each other. A few days later, the girl promised she would come back brilliantly and went for surgery. The players that Luna sought and gathered with great effort were the main reason for this. So she found the courage and decided to bet her life on that 30%. And even though she seems like an innocent little girl, she is braver than anyone they have ever met. Despite going through unimaginable hardships in the real world, she always returned to the game with a bright smile. This smile illuminated the whole environment and warmed the hearts of everyone around her. Due to her foolishness and generous personality, she was a merchant who always ended up losing. At this moment, someone approaches from behind the protagonist, and when he looks, he is extremely astonished, as in front of him is the little girl. Lee is completely speechless, seeing that she really returns to the game, and tears start to fall from his face. Since this person was the only one he managed to open up to, the girl gives a radiant smile while introducing her name in the game. With all her cuteness and presence that lights up the environment, her character was named Starflower. A while later, we return to the demonic world, a dimension separate from the human world. Recently, it was completely annihilated and only now had its data recovered. However, this ended up causing a problem, and all the demonic monsters started to attack each other. The tribes that were recently resurrected started a conflict between factions. The eradication of the torment caused by the long-missing Demon King made the demon's fury grow even more, and all this culminated in a chilling, unforgettable war. Seeing this scene, it seems someone is deeply concerned about their world. This someone is Death, who realizes that everything is in pure chaos. It was to be expected that this would happen, and there is only one way to calm the spirits of this crowd. He then takes the essence of the Demon King out of his pocket. Since he managed to find this beauty rolling on the floor when the world was rebuilt, the Demon King must have dropped it while dying. Unlike the sword, this energy is not sealed, but it is also not something that can be delivered to anyone. The little ghost also doesn't want to wait until another Demon King appears and thinks about finding a person to become one. At that moment, scenes of the protagonist being totally creepy come to his mind, and a brilliant idea arises, making the demon's assistant happy, since he just thought of an excellent candidate. Then we return to the human world. The protagonist is obviously already with his baton in hand while preparing an attack upward, and strikes using only 1% of his maximum power, causing the instant defeat of a level 4 rabbit bear that falls to the ground completely defeated. His goal in defeating such a weak monster is to collect its teeth, and apparently he has been doing this for quite some time as he has a whole bag full of rabbit bear teeth. He then tells his little dragon that it's time to go, since they got enough, and besides there are no more monsters in the forest. The two then return to the initial village, and he seems to be looking for someone he arranged to meet near the entrance. While walking through the streets of the initial village, people talk about him. But the young man ignores everyone and focuses on one thing, calling the person and saying he finally arrived. Starflower calls him Stick Uncle, looking extremely happy to have found him. Apparently, the person he planned to meet today was the young Biole, who has now returned to her old habits of being a merchant. Until recently, she was living with a rare disease and with a few days to live. But even in the face of this ruthless fate, the girl bravely faced it and overcame the disease, recovering completely and returning to play. Stick Uncle delivers the rabbit bear teeth she asked for, making the girl extremely happy. She then uses the potion creation skill, replacing the ingredients with countless portions. Seeing the quantity, the protagonist celebrates that she will make a lot of money if she sells everything. But the truth is she didn't make them to sell. When he discovers this, the protagonist is a little scared, but soon sees the girl running towards the workers while telling them to drink the potions. Some ask who this girl is, while others already recognize her, even though it's been a long time since they last saw each other. Lee just watches that scene impressed, since that child is not only loved by the players, but even by the game's NPCs. Seeing this, he can't help but feel happy for her, while thinking he should go hunt some more rabbit bears. Meanwhile, in the real world, we return to the protagonist's building. But this time it's not him that's shown, it's Han, who is depressingly sitting on her bed, showing a saddened look by the things that happened in the restaurant. But suddenly her sister arrives in the room while shouting, asking if it was that guy in underwear that left her like that. Han tries to disguise, saying it wasn't quite like that, but only irritates her sister even more. She then stays silent and decides to say that a friend is going through a problem. Recently, this friend said she is interested in a guy. At first, he was just a player who didn't stand out much. But as they spent a lot of time together and shared various experiences, she started to wait for this person. Even without knowing why, she keeps waiting for him, just to receive his help while she's crying and to smile with him again. But suddenly, she realized she only thinks about him all day and wants to know him a little better. But of course, she still doesn't like him. She just wants to see him more and more, actually many times a day. At least that was what her supposed friend told her. But this lie doesn't fool her sister, who just asks what kind of relationship she wants to have with him, and warns that the young girl is a celebrity, so she should keep an eye on the people she relates to. Han realizes her lie didn't work and that her sister has been watching her from the beginning, then confirms that the guy she's interested in is the same one who is part of her group. Her sister then warns that if an idol starts dating, she will also lose most of her fans, and she shouldn't even complain about it, as the original role of a celebrity is to receive the love of her fans. In a way, she would be betraying them all, and all the work she had to get there will collapse in the blink of an eye. The young girl just remains silent listening to this, but her sister compliments that she also will try to stop her. After all, her life is still hers, and no one should tell her what she should or shouldn't do, so she will continue to support her no matter what she does. With these comforting words, Han pauses for a bit while realizing her sister is on her side, but she soon compliments that she can always look for another celebrity when one is lost. But jokes aside, she asks again what kind of relationship the young girl wants to have with him. Han thinks for a moment before answering and says she doesn't know either, but when remembering all the moments the goddess waifu was together with the protagonist, her jealousy ends up surfacing a little more, and her true feeling of making him hers comes to light. Her sister seems to agree with her determined attitude, but she reflects a bit on the situation, and says that the guy is an adult, so he would be arrested if that really happened. Han then thinks of a solution that will solve the problems, and decides to make him fall in love, so she will just have to wait 3 more years and they can start dating. Then she humbly asks her older sister for advice, as she has never talked to a guy and much less imagines what it's like to date. Proudly, her sister agrees, saying she just needs to trust her, making the young girl extremely happy while entering the game to first meet the guy. She looks at her young singer, totally in love, and decides to start with the research, then takes her cell phone out of her pocket and starts searching on Google how to flirt with a guy. Working as a manager from the beginning, she's a talented person known in the area for her skills. But in reality, this lady is 27 years old and has never dated. At this moment, we return to the game, where the little death wanders through the human world. Tired, he thinks it's like looking for a needle in a haystack and wonders how he will find that guy. But when he thinks he can't just ask the demonic tribe to look for him, he hears a huge noise, leaving him extremely confused while looking to see what it is, but soon sees a gigantic explosion rising behind the mountains. And with that, he immediately realizes it's him. Our protagonist is clearing the rabbit bear monsters from the forest and says the drop rate is high, so the farm was very fast. But before returning to the village, he hears a noise, then sees someone running towards him. This person was the captain of Love, who apparently seems to be facing a rabbit bear, quickly dodging the monster's attack with just a jump, while spinning in the air preparing a kick that hits the monster's face hard, making some of its teeth come out as it falls to the ground, totally eliminated. Lee is extremely confused by what he just saw, since he didn't expect the Love captain to appear there so suddenly. She extends her hand to deliver something, and shows some of the teeth she just took from the monster. The two stare at each other for a while without saying anything, while the protagonist seems a little unsure of what to do, but soon apologizes for what happened at the restaurant, as he shouldn't have taken that woman without first asking for permission. And as an apology, he says they could have dinner later if she wanted to, realizing he really feels bad about what happened. The young girl gives a small smile, and says she will reserve a time in her schedule to eat with him. But at that moment, she approaches with that same threatening tone, and asked about something the cockroach said that day when she mentioned they were sleeping next to each other in bed, and also about the feeling in the game being the same as in reality. These words intrigue the young girl's mind, who asks what she meant by that. In a totally threatening tone, but with a cute face, she makes the protagonist afraid to answer. So just tries to change the subject, saying it wasn't anything important and she shouldn't care about something like that. But the young girl keeps insisting to try to find out, and when she realizes he won't speak, she ends up going after him. While the two were fighting on the ground, the Demon King's assistant approaches, looking for the protagonist he is sure is there. But at that moment, he sees a terrifying scene, making all the hairs the ghost doesn't have stand up, since he can imagine that the guy who defeated the Demon King is being totally destroyed. Surely this is a twist, and as they say, there will always be someone stronger than you. The demonic look that person has, and that expression of pure devastating anger, makes this person have all the requirements to become the Demon King. Han looks at that creature suddenly appearing with something green and asks what it is. But the assistant simply says she deserves her ball and should grab it. The captain still doesn't understand what he's talking about and asks who he is. But at that moment, everything around her starts to shine, and a message that she obtained the Demon King's essence appears, along with a message of class change that will change her original class to the hidden class Demon King. Meanwhile, the self-proclaimed god says he finally gathered them all. Each of his chess pieces is properly placed in their places. Originally, the final component should have been Yopi. But as he remembers Luma's actions, he realizes she is openly resisting his plan. However, all this doesn't matter as this is the final chapter of the game. Meanwhile, Han is emitting a green light, and the protagonist below is bothered by the strong light. But suddenly he is surprised, as the Captain of Love is floating in front of him, while system notifications appear saying she will change to the hidden class Demon Queen. Thanks to this, all of her attributes were increased 10 times. Even so, the young girl doesn't seem happy at all and asks how she's changing class without even agreeing to it. Stick asks the dragon what's going on, but he has no idea either. Han continues to shout to stop the class change. Even so, the system keeps giving her other privileges. Suddenly, the Demon King's origin ability is activated, and the captain's love hair that is usually pink ends up changing to a whitish tone. Her characteristic clothes also undergo a transformation, becoming something much more worthy of a Demon King. And with that, the transformation was complete, and she became the Demon Queen completely. However, the young girl in reality was even more scared to realize that her hair turned white, while the protagonist and Eurus discuss how she was forced to change class without even a yes or no question. Death explains that the Demon King's origin ability allows you to transform into the infinite magic body that only kings have. She can only use unique abilities in this form except for the passive ability Authority. But even with this explanation, the young girl still doesn't understand what it is, and as if listening to what she says, the system itself gives an example for her to understand. Suddenly, the pearl on her necklace starts to shine. Not only it, but the 3 pearls scattered around her new clothes. Then some mana wings form on her back, and the synchronization with the demonic body reaches 1.3%, generating some horns on her head, along with a modification of her eyes that are now much wilder. With all this, the essence of the Demon King was unlocked, and the protagonist, along with his dragon, just watches the whole show from the front row. The young girl then points her index finger up while activating the destruction ability, making a small ball of energy form on the tip of her finger. But this ball that was initially small quickly grows until it reaches a considerable size. And with the stabilized size, she fires the energy upwards, causing an explosion comparable to a nuclear bomb. Seeing all this destruction caused by just one of her powers, the young girl is paralyzed, while the notification that the ability demonstration ended appears. Then it is shown that the huge explosion now generated smoke that extends across the blue sky. And finally, the horns and mana wings created during the transformation disappear into the air. At that moment, the protagonist appears saying she got pretty strong and that ability was very good. But the young girl just asks what she should do now that she was suddenly turned into a Demon King. And now that she is a villain, theoretically, she should fight against him. Even her hair turning white suddenly is something that's affecting her, since she thinks she got a bit strange with these new clothes and hair. But seeing that beauty, the protagonist ends up blushing a little, while saying he doesn't find her strange in this form at all. At that moment, the assistant appears praising the young girl for achieving 1.3% synchronization. This number is higher than the previous Demon King, and this means she has more darkness in her heart than the hero Yopi. But while desperately holding his face, she says this was not her wish and wants to return to her normal form. But the ghost says this is impossible as her body has already absorbed the essence and it won't come out until she dies. The other problem is that if she dies, the character will be deleted as she just became a unique boss monster. Seeing his friend crushing Death's face, the protagonist thinks he seems comfortable, but the little dragon gets jealous and says he is much more comfortable than that little ghost. Han is asking if she has to stay in that form forever and if there is no way to cancel it. But this is something the Demon King's assistant doesn't want, as it's better for him if she stays that way. But these words only irritate the young girl even more, who starts squeezing the ghost's face violently. Lee, seeing that, starts to think she's a bit stupid, as she could just say something like cancel Demon King mode to get out of the transformation. A few hours later at the Arden Castle, we find out that it is one of the main castles in the game, with a massive wall and a commander called the best impregnable fortress in Chrono Life. Suddenly something catches the attention of one of the knights of this fortress. It is a monster quickly approaching. This thing seems to be a wolf that quickly jumps on the castle walls while climbing them. With ease, he jumps above the guards and looks at the two with a fierce look, while they can only cry for their mothers, as they were easily defeated with just one attack. The two fall to the ground in front of the last remaining guard. He is desperate, trying to recognize what monster is that which invaded, realizing that the creature is a werewolf. But suddenly something crucial happens and the monster speaks, asking if the man's eyes are efficient as he mistook him for a monster. Obviously, the guard is shocked to hear him talking, and soon other two beings appear around him. The lizard compliments that they are not monsters. In reality, their species is called human beasts. Hearing this, the little guard, who knows what his fate is, begins to despair, and soon receives an attack that eliminates him instantly. He falls near the bodies of his other two friends, while more and more castle guards approach the creatures, who are a bit confused by the sudden appearance of so many humans. Soon the three monsters are surrounded by an army, and the guild leader appears saying he can't believe this. They dare to enter the Arden castle, and even being beasts with weak minds, this is still unbelievable. Whether human beasts or whatever they were, he doesn't care and just orders his soldiers to get rid of them. Soon the army advances to combat, while their general just watches everything in silence. But soon he starts talking to his audience who is watching the live, commenting that he never heard of these human beasts that can communicate. He keeps talking a lot while the chat gets annoyed, as he is just showing his face while the battle happens. But suddenly something catches his attention, and when he looks ahead, he sees his entire army defeated. Only those three monsters are standing, looking at him with a threatening look. Scared by that scene, he can only think of one thing: quickly running away from the monsters. At that moment, the number of viewers in his live is 38,933, and even being people who prefer stimulating content, they all sent messages for him to run away. His judgment and that of the viewers were the same, and the man simply started running quickly, while wondering what was happening. But even being an elven class, which is quite fast, it was still not enough to escape, and with just one bite he was finished. With that, the castle was captured in the blink of an eye by the three mysterious beings who appeared out of nowhere.
Guys, the video is over. I just wanted to ask for your attention real quick. For those who aren't subscribed, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps a lot. 87% of the audience isn't subscribed, so if you want to help, please subscribe.